At the end of chapter 10, there are 28 symbolization exercises, half of which are solved in the text. What I'm going to do here is look at several of the others, not all of them, but a good chunk of them. And what you should do, as usual, is look at each problem, pause the lecture, try your own solution, and then have a look at mine. It'll work much better if you do that than if you just passively listen to what I have to say. So with that in mind, let's get started. Here's our first example. Ask yourself, what kind of sentence is it? And see what you can do by way of coming up with a solution. Well, as for what kind of sentence it is, it's a universal sentence. It says something about every member of a certain class, what class or group, employees with sick leave. Well, if X is an employee with sick leave, then X is an employee, and X has sick leave. To make it a statement about every member of this group, we don't just start with a universal quantifier. We put an arrow. That's the general form for making a statement about every member of a group. Quantifier, specify the subject, put an arrow. Now, what about these people? If X is an employee with sick leave, what the sentence is saying is that X has to inform the HR department. A little more colloquially, and sometimes a little more helpfully, if you are an employee with sick leave, then you have to inform the HR department. Give this one a try. All freshmen and sophomores must visit the advising office. Once again, it's a universal, and it does say something about every member of a certain category, but you need to be careful, as you know from what we've said in class, about cases like this. If you treat it as a single sentence that's governed by a quantifier, then you have to be very careful what you make the subject out to be, and this is not the way to do it. If you do it this way, you've got a sentence about people who are both freshmen and sophomores. This says X is a freshman and a sophomore, and that we know isn't what the sentence is about. A good way to think about it is this. What is it saying about you if you're in this class? If you're a freshman or a sophomore, then you must visit the advising office. Sometimes it can be helpful in sort of triggering the right answer to use the pronoun you as a way of thinking about these examples. So if you're a freshman or a sophomore, then you have to visit the advising office. We know you could also do this sentence this way, and it wouldn't be wrong. It's up to you which way you do it. Carrying on. Some people aren't happy unless they're complaining. Think about that one. Give it a try and see what you come up with. Well, it's in general like a some P or Q, or perhaps some P or not Q, though it doesn't quite comfortably fit either of those. But it's certainly saying something about some members of a certain group, and so it's an existential. And it's saying something about some people, so the way that we start a sentence of that sort is this way. Existential quantifier, bracket, subject, class, and then the and. So suppose you're one of these people. What's the sentence saying about you? Saying you aren't happy unless you're complaining. If X is one of these people, X isn't happy unless X is complaining. And treating the unless as an or, that gives us X is not happy unless X is complaining. So there's the solution. Notice here I used S here and T here just to keep from collisions between predicate letters. Students who study if and only if they have an exam are taking a risk. Give that a try. What kind of sentence? Well, we don't have a quantifier word in the English, but it seems pretty clearly to be intended as a universal. It's not just saying some students who study if and only if they have an exam are taking a risk. It's saying in general, students who study if and only if they have an exam are taking a risk. So it's best treated as a universal. We need to figure out what the subject class is, and in English it's easy. It's students who study if and only if they have an exam. We need to convert that into symbols. So students who study if and only if they have an exam. Well, to be in that class you have to be a student, and the who here is in effect functioning as a conjunction. You have to study if and only if you have an exam. That's the subject. Now we use the arrow because we're saying something about every member of this class, every member if any. And what it's saying is that if you're in this class, you are at risk. If you're a student who studies if and only if you have an exam, you're at risk. It couldn't be an and, because in that case we'd be saying everything is a student who studies if and only if it has an exam and is also at risk. The and would be wrong. Give this a try. No rattlers are safe except the ones that are defanged. Got an extra R here. Let's get rid of that. No rattlers are safe except the ones that are defanged. We talked about except in class. So take what we said there, apply it to this case, and see what you come up with. Well, it's a statement about all rattlers. So if X is a rattler, what are we being told about X? Well, we're being told that, remember how the except works. The except is like an exclusive or in some ways. Though we don't use a connective for exclusive or, that's what we have to keep in mind, is dividing things into two non-overlapping groups. So if you're a rattler, you're safe if and only if you're defanged. And that's one way to do it. Another way to think about it is this. Sorry, we need this. This is exactly the same thing. If you're a rattler, or if X is a rattler, then X isn't safe if and only if X isn't defanged. But that almost certainly will strike you as more awkward, and so most of you, I suspect, will have come up with or will prefer that translation. Either is correct, and there is even another way we could do it, but we'll leave it at this for the time being. Safe if and only if defanged. That's what we're being told about rattlers. Here we're going to use P to represent people, persons, whatever. If everyone cooperates, then no one will get hurt. This one involves something that we didn't talk about head on in class. See if you can see what's going on here. If everyone cooperates, no one will get hurt. The thing to realize about this one is that the main operation is not a connective. The main operation is if-then. This sentence is a conditional. Its antecedent is everyone cooperates. Its consequent is no one will get hurt. But the main operation is the arrow. So we start out by saying everyone cooperates. That's our antecedent. For all x, if x is a person, then x cooperates. And because the whole sentence is a conditional, we start this way. If every person cooperates, then no one will get hurt. No one will get hurt. How do we say no one will get hurt? Once again, it's a generalization about people. If you're a person, then you won't get hurt. So there we have it. If this is true, then this is true. If everyone cooperates, then no one will get hurt. The novelty here was that the sentence is a conditional. Its main operation is not a quantifier. If some dogs are pets and all dogs are mammals, then some pets are mammals. Give this one a try. Well, the last one should have primed you to the idea that not all of these sentences are governed by quantifiers, and this is an example. This sentence is not a quantified sentence. It's a sentence with quantified sentences as parts. So the form of this sentence is this. If some dogs are pets and all dogs are mammals, we've got to fill in those blanks obviously, then some pets are mammals. That's the overall form, so now we have to fill in these blanks. Some dogs are pets. That's a straightforward categorical sentence. All dogs are mammals. Another straightforward categorical sentence. And perhaps we'll switch up the brackets here just to make it easier to read the sentence. The consequent is some pets are mammals. And that's just a straightforward particular affirmative. So once again, we have a sentence that has quantifiers in it, but isn't a quantified sentence. In this case, again, as with the previous example, it's a conditional. Platypuses are oviparous mammals with webbed feet and duckbills. Try that. It's a statement about platypuses, and it seems pretty clearly to be universal. It's telling us something about all platypuses. So we know it starts like this. So if X is a platypus, what does the sentence tell us about X? It tells us that X is oviparous and is a mammal and has webbed feet and has a duck bill. Now, if we were being really strict here, we wouldn't allow this to stand as a well-formed formula. We'd have to break it up in some way or another. But we're not going to worry about that. There's really no reason for preferring one way of breaking this up as opposed to another. And so even though this is not officially well formed by our rules, we'll do what virtually every text does. We'll treat it as well formed. So there's our sentence. None but the lonely-hearted can know the pain. Remember what we said about none but? Give this a try. None but is like only, and only tells us what comes after an arrow. It's a universal generalization. It's implicitly about people, but we won't bother putting that in. We'll just assume that's the domain. If X knows the pain, then X is lonely-hearted. And there's the solution. If exams are useful if and only if they are relevant, then some professors delight in academic frivolity. Try that. You can see once again that we don't have a quantified sentence here, that what we have in fact is a sentence with a main connective that's the main operation. And again, we can see that it's an if-then sentence, so each of the examples of this that we've seen so far have been conditionals. That's what we have here. The antecedent of the conditional is exams are useful if and only if they're relevant. That sounds like a universal statement about exams. So our antecedent is going to be, for all x, it's a statement about exams. If x is an exam, then x is useful if and only if relevant. It's saying if that's so, that exams are useful if and only if relevant, then some professors delight in academic frivolity. Well, that sounds like just a long-winded kind of particular affirmative, and that's what it is. It's a statement about some professors that's saying that they delight in academic frivolity. So there's our solution. Only people who persevere if they face setbacks are neither defeated nor dejected. This is the most complicated one that we've looked at so far. Pause the lecture, see what you come up with, and then when you think you've got it, start the lecture again. Okay, a lot to notice. First, it's an only, so we know that people who persevere if they face setbacks comes after the arrow inside the sentence itself. The sentence is going to be quantified. After the quantifier is going to be a conditional, and this bit will be the consequent of that conditional. So what's the subject of the sentence? About what class are we saying something? It's people who are neither defeated nor dejected. Now this is tricky. It's a sentence about people who are neither defeated nor dejected. The word people occurs explicitly in the first part, but it's implicitly at work in the second part as well. So, and that may have tripped some of you up. It's not the worst mistake in the world, but it is really what's going on here. It's a statement about people who are neither defeated nor dejected. So if you're in the subject class, then you're a person and you're neither defeated nor dejected. There's another way to write neither nor, of course. It's up to you which way you do it. Okay, so the only, what we're being told about these people who are neither defeated nor dejected is that they're people who persevere if they face setbacks. So to be in the predicate class, you have to be a person and you have to persevere if you face setbacks. The if here tells us that the bit about facing setbacks comes before the arrow. And those people persevere. So that's it. Our subject is people who are neither defeated nor dejected. Our predicate is people who persevere if they face setbacks, and that's our solution. Finally, no one, that is to say no person who complains if he is hungry, will be treated well except for those persons who have friends in high places. This is even more complicated. Give it a try. Well, it's a universal. It's about all members of a certain class. What class? People who complain if hungry. So if you're in the class of people who complain if hungry, you're what this sentence is about. To be in the subject class, you have to be a person, and if hungry, then you complain. That's the class that the sentence is about. Then it says what. Now this is where you really have to bore in and think what the sentence is saying. Suppose you're a person who complains if hungry. What's the sentence saying about you? It's saying you won't be treated well except in the case that you have friends in high places. You won't be treated well except in the case that you have friends in high places. What that means, given what we said about except, is that you'll be treated well if and only if you have friends in high places. X will be treated well if and only if X has friends in high places. The way we got to that is just by thinking about what's going on here. What are you being told about people in the subject class? You're being told that they're treated well in exactly one situation. They've got friends in high places. That's clearly what the English means, and that's what's reflected in our symbolization. Now these are a bit tricky. You may want to come back to some of them later. You may have questions that you want to ask about some of them, but in the meantime, you've got some stuff to think about here, and I hope that this has been helpful.